Resuming debate, the honourable member for South Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I find myself more distressed today after nearly 6 years of service in this House than on any other day in any other debate. The Liberal government's closure motion, limiting debate, stifling the people's representatives in the very place we are elected to give voice to the voiceless, the egregious affront to public policy creation playing out before us, the terrible precedent this sets for the future, the abandonment of the vulnerable in our society. I am left with the echoes of persons with disabilities and those I know who have come out the other side of mental illness suffering. This will not be a legacy to be proud of. What started out as a bill that many in my community could and did get behind if proper safeguards stayed in place and if conscience rights were protected, has gone from a scenario of some hope to a bad dream to a nightmare. We know where this is going. The Liberal government will recklessly bring in legislation that grievously affects those who are struggling with mental illness, add them to the list of Canadians struggling with other disabilities, and say, for you, fellow Canadians, for you, our most vulnerable, we have an exit plan, one we know you may not agree with, but one we have decided is best for you and society as a whole. How dare you? How dare you propose to abandon these Canadians? And how dare the parliamentary secretary earlier put into question my motivation or the motivation of my constituents to change our legislative landscape without proper debate, without even allowing the Justice Committee to hear witnesses, without the legislated mandatory review that the government has ignored. I say to my colleagues, stop, consider. Your actions fly in the face of testimony we've already heard in committee that coercion does exist and not all Canadians are treated with equal dignity. Minister Lametti testified at committee today that his party members have been given a free vote. So it is up to each person elected to this place to be counted. The minister also stated that he will create a committee of experts to study the sensitive issues before us after this Senate amended bill is voted on. If it is that important, if there is no consensus, as the minister previously stated, why would we pass an appointed Senate's version of a life or death bill? Why would we not give the proper thought and hear from the experts first? To those whose sole underlying condition is mental illness, why are you not worthy of being heard? When you are at your lowest in terms of coping with your life, why should MAID be what is suggested to you? Why not hope? Why not comfort? Why not a path to recovery? Where is the funding for this? Where is the debate on this? Where is our humanity? I've had times in my life when I suffered from what is termed situational depression, a recognized mental illness diagnosis, not due to an underlying chemical imbalance, but a coping challenge brought about by my situation at that time, when my husband suddenly died, leaving me with small children to raise on my own, and when my baby son died. Life can be very tough at times. When you are in the grips of depression, you do believe that the world, and even those who depend on you for their fundamentals, would be better off without you around. These ideations can be, in my case, were transient, but I needed time and support to find my bearings again. What of those who have just suffered a catastrophic injury? As a member of the Justice Committee, I studied this bill very closely, or at least a bill by the same name. In committee, we considered the impacts of expanding MAID to Canadians whose death is not imminent, and the efficacy of removing many safeguards that were put in place in the original MAID regime in 2016, like the 2-witness requirement and 10-day reflection period. What we did not review is expanding assisted dying where the sole underlying condition is mental illness. Whether you generally support this bill or not, even if you support this specific Senate amendment, you can't deny this. We in this House, we elected representatives whose constituents rely on us to do our work in a measured, intelligent, and compassionate way, did not and are not being given the opportunity to study this expansion and hear from those directly affected. And experts who may assist us, we'll hear from them later. Will we? Or will this government ignore the review mandate just like it ignored the first one? Is this our process now? Is this how Canada's Parliament creates good, defensible public policy? No diligent consultation, no close review of the implications. We're just going to wing it now. We're not going to challenge amendments from the Senate that fundamentally change this or other bills. This amendment would make Canada's assisted dying regime by far the most permissive on the planet. Minister Lametti stated today, quote, that we were always going to study this very complex change carefully and look at it with the help of experts. And yet here we are, voting it into law and even closing down debate. How does this work? What I do agree with is the minister's other statements today. We are parliamentarians. We have a responsibility. Yes, we are, and yes, we do. Why not study this in committee? Conservatives brought a motion to sit next week during constituency week to study this. This motion was voted down. Minister Lametti also stated this morning that the Senate
Remember not to mention ministers by their names.
Also stated this morning that the Senate, for perhaps the first time in his words, is actually doing its work and acting as a place of sober second thought. That is not what this is. The Senate didn't just tweak this bill. They entirely changed its scope, affecting the lives of millions of Canadians. And if you think I'm exaggerating, a simple online search shows that 1 in 5 Canadians experience a mental illness or addiction problem at any given time. That 70% of mental health problems have their onset during childhood or adolescence, and those under 24 years of age are particularly affected. By the time Canadians reach 40, 1 in 2 have had a mental illness. It was bad enough when the Liberals seemingly ignored calls for more safeguards from nearly every advocacy group for Canadians with disabilities. But to not even review this complex expansion is an offensive abandonment of responsibility. The Liberals' willingness to run with it is a complete 180-degree about-face. On November 3rd, the Minister of Justice at committee said, Bill C-7 proposes to exclude persons whose sole medical condition is a mental illness. Experts disagree on whether medical assistance in dying can ever be safely made available in such cases. Unpredictable illness trajectories mean there is always the possibility of improvement and recovery. The exclusion gives Parliament more time to reflect on this complex question, which is fraught with serious risks. Was this Senate amendment always part of the Liberal plan? Do we not need more time, more reflection? The appointed Senate has entirely overreached and overstepped its mandate. Every member who votes in favour of this amended bill today should really think hard. I don't say this because I don't agree with their policy preferences. I have policy disagreements with members of my own party. This is no longer a discussion about policy. This is about fulfilling our role as parliamentarians. To vote in support to a fundamentally amended bill by an unelected Senate without review is an abdication of responsibilities. Today marks the one-year anniversary of the COVID-19 pandemic. Given everything Canadians have gone through in the last year, how can we today, of all days, without study, pass this law? There's still time to wake up from this nightmare before the bells ring. As John Donne famously wrote, "Any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." Thank you, Madam Speaker.